The crystal chandelier reflected off the poisoned dessert as 7-year-old Emma Harris watched the billionaire CEO raise the spoon to his lips. In 3 seconds, Marcus Wellington would be dead, unless a janitor's daughter found the courage to scream. But no one imagined what would come next. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The Wellington Industries annual gala buzzed with the energy of Manhattan's elite, crystal glasses clinking against a backdrop of classical music and hushed conversations about stock prices and offshore investments. Marcus Wellington, 32 and worth $11 billion, moved through the crowd with practiced ease, his Tom Ford tuxedo tailored to perfection, diamond cufflinks catching the light from the massive chandeliers above. Every detail of the evening had been orchestrated to showcase his company's unprecedented quarterly growth, from the imported orchids adorning each table to the 5-course meal prepared by a Michelin-starred chef. Emma Harris pressed herself against the wall near the kitchen entrance, her blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her yellow cotton dress, a hand-me-down from her cousin, a stark contrast to the designer gowns swirling around her. At 7 years old, she wasn't supposed to be in the main ballroom, but her father, David, had been called to fix a plumbing emergency upstairs, and she'd wandered away from the service area where she was supposed to wait quietly. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus's voice boomed through the microphone as he took center stage, his smile radiating the confidence that had built his empire from a small tech startup to a global powerhouse. "Tonight, we celebrate not just our success, but our commitment to innovation and excellence." The crowd applauded enthusiastically, glasses raised in toast after toast. Emma watched from her corner, mesmerized by the glittering world she'd never seen before, a universe away from the tiny 2-bedroom apartment she shared with her parents in Queens, where her mother Sarah worked double shifts cleaning office buildings just to make rent. As the evening progressed, Emma noticed something that made her stomach twist with unease. She'd been watching the kitchen staff, fascinated by their choreographed movements, when she saw a server, someone she didn't recognize from her father's descriptions of the regular Wellington Industries staff, slip something small and white into the chocolate mousse destined for Mr. Wellington's table. The server's movements were quick, practiced, almost invisible to everyone else in the bustling kitchen, but Emma had always been observant, a trait that often got her in trouble at school when she pointed out things adults preferred to ignore. Her teacher called it an unusually acute attention to detail for a child her age, though Emma just thought of it as seeing what others missed. Her heart raced as she watched the contaminated dessert make its way through the kitchen, past the head chef's final inspection, onto the silver tray and toward the dining room. She knew she should tell someone, but who would believe a 7-year-old? And what if she was wrong? What if she'd imagined the whole thing? Marcus was deep in conversation with the mayor and several board members when the dessert course arrived. The chocolate mousse, garnished with gold leaf and fresh raspberries, looked like a work of art. He picked up his spoon, still talking about the new sustainability initiative his company was launching, completely unaware of the danger sitting inches from his lips. Emma's breath caught in her throat. Every instinct in her small body screamed that something was terribly wrong. She'd heard her parents talking in hushed tones about people who might want to hurt Mr. Wellington, business rivals, disgruntled former employees, even foreign competitors. Her father had mentioned increased security measures, additional background checks, and new protocols for all staff. "The future of technology lies not just in innovation," Marcus continued, raising his spoon toward his mouth, "but in our responsibility to—" "No! Don't eat that!" Emma's voice cut through the elegant atmosphere like a fire alarm, high-pitched and desperate. Every conversation stopped, every head turned. The live orchestra faltered, missing several notes before trailing off into silence. Marcus froze, the spoon halfway to his mouth, chocolate mousse trembling on the silver utensil. 200 pairs of eyes focused on the small blonde girl in the yellow dress, standing alone near the kitchen entrance, with tears streaming down her face. "Someone poisoned it," Emma cried out, her voice breaking with emotion. "I saw a man put something in your dessert. Please don't eat it." The silence that followed was deafening. Then came the laughter. Soft chuckles at first, then full-throated amusement from the sophisticated crowd. A billionaire CEO threatened by a child's imagination. The absurdity of it struck them as delightful dinner entertainment. "Isn't that precious?" Someone whispered loudly enough for half the room to hear. "The help's daughter thinks she's protecting Marcus Wellington." But Marcus didn't laugh. Something in the child's voice, the genuine terror in her eyes, the way she was shaking, it reminded him of his own childhood, of moments when he'd known something was wrong, but couldn't make the adults listen. He set down his spoon carefully and gestured toward his head of security, James Morrison, who was already moving toward the girl. "Wait," Marcus said, holding up his hand. "Emma, isn't it? Your father works maintenance here." He'd made it his business to know every employee's family situation, a practice that had served him well in building loyalty. "Tell me exactly what you saw." Emma wiped her nose with the back of her hand, trying to control her sobbing. "A man I don't know, with dark hair and a black jacket like the other servers, but different shoes, expensive ones like yours. He waited until everyone was busy, then dropped something small and white into your mousse when he thought nobody was looking." The specificity of her observation sent a chill through the room. James Morrison was already on his radio, calling for the building to be secured, while 2 other security officers began quietly checking the desserts at neighboring tables. "Which man?" Marcus asked gently, crouching down to Emma's eye level despite his expensive tuxedo. Emma pointed with a trembling finger toward the service area. "He's gone now. He left right after he gave the tray to the regular server." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "My daddy says bad people sometimes try to hurt good people who have important jobs. I was scared you might die." The head of security returned within minutes, carrying a small evidence bag and wearing an expression that made the color drain from Marcus's face. "Sir, we need to evacuate the building immediately." The child was right. Preliminary field test shows traces of ricin in the dessert. The elegant ballroom erupted into chaos. Guests rushed toward exits, while security herded them through controlled evacuation procedures. Emergency services sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. Within minutes, the glittering celebration had transformed into a crime scene, with federal agents interviewing witnesses and forensic specialists photographing every surface. But Marcus Wellington couldn't stop staring at the small blonde girl who had saved his life, now crying quietly in her father's arms as EMTs checked her for exposure to any toxins. Emma Harris, 7 years old, daughter of a janitor and a cleaning lady, living in a Queens apartment that probably cost less than what he spent on wine each month, had possessed the courage and clarity to save him when every adult in the room had failed to notice the threat. As FBI agents began their investigation and his security team implemented lockdown protocols, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow, he would drive to Queens personally. Not in his usual limousine with its bulletproof glass and security detail, but in his red Ferrari, the car that represented everything he'd achieved, everything Emma's act of bravery had preserved. He needed to look this remarkable child and her family in the eye and find a way to express gratitude that went far beyond words. The little girl, who had saved a billionaire's life, was about to discover that heroes, no matter how small, never go unrewarded. But neither Marcus nor Emma could have imagined the extraordinary journey their meeting would set in motion, or the dangerous enemies that his gratitude would awaken. David Harris stood at the window of their second-floor apartment, watching the Queen's street below with nervous energy that had kept him awake all night. The morning sun cast long shadows between the cramped buildings, highlighting the contrast between their neighborhood and the gleaming Manhattan towers where he spent his days maintaining the empire Marcus Wellington had built. "She's been having nightmares," Sarah whispered, joining her husband at the window while Emma slept fitfully in the bedroom they'd converted from a closet. "She keeps asking if the bad man will come back, if Mr. Wellington is really safe." David wrapped his arm around his wife's shoulders, feeling the exhaustion that had settled into her bones from working 3 different cleaning jobs just to cover their basic expenses. FBI agents said they caught the guy trying to board a flight to Switzerland. Emma's testimony was crucial. She remembered details even the security cameras missed. The sound of an engine unlike anything their neighborhood had ever heard made both parents peer down at the street below. A red Ferrari, its paint gleaming like liquid fire, was attempting to navigate the narrow road crowded with double-parked cars and potholes that the city had promised to fix for 3 years running. "That can't be," Sarah breathed, recognizing the distinctive profile behind the wheel despite the baseball cap and sunglasses that couldn't disguise Marcus Wellington's aristocratic features. Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes, still wearing the same yellow dress from the night before because it was her only good outfit. "Mommy, why is there a fancy car outside? Are we in trouble because I yelled at the party?" Before her parents could answer, their doorbell rang, a sound so rare in their building that it took them a moment to recognize it. Most visitors just shouted from the street or called on cell phones. David made his way downstairs, his heart pounding with a mixture of anxiety and disbelief that one of the world's richest men was standing outside his daughter's home. Marcus Wellington looked strangely vulnerable without his usual entourage of assistants and bodyguards, wearing jeans and a simple white button-down shirt that probably cost more than David's monthly salary, but somehow made him seem more human. In his hands, he carried a small wrapped box and an expression of genuine humility that transformed his face from the confident CEO photographed in business magazines to someone who looked almost boyish despite his 32 years. "Mr. Harris, I hope you don't mind my coming here unannounced," Marcus began, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. "I wanted to thank Emma personally, away from all the chaos and reporters. What she did last night." He paused, struggling to find words adequate to express the magnitude of her actions. "She saved my life." David invited him upstairs, acutely aware of the peeling paint on the stairwell walls and the broken light fixture he'd been meaning to repair for months. Their apartment, which had always felt cozy despite its size, now seemed impossibly small with Marcus Wellington's presence filling the tiny living room. Emma appeared from behind her mother's legs, no longer the brave little girl who had commanded a ballroom's attention, but a shy 7-year-old overwhelmed by having such an important visitor in her home. She stared at Marcus with wide blue eyes, taking in every detail of his appearance as if trying to memorize the moment. "Hello, Emma," Marcus said, crouching down to her level, just as he had the night before. "I brought you something to say thank you, but first I want you to know that what you did was the bravest thing I've ever seen. You saved my life when no one else could." Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. "I was really scared that you would die, and I couldn't let that happen because my daddy says you're a good man who helps people have jobs." The simplicity and sincerity of her words hit Marcus harder than any board presentation or hostile takeover attempt ever had. He handed her the small wrapped box, watching her face light up as she carefully removed the paper to reveal a delicate silver bracelet with a small pendant shaped like a star. "My grandmother gave me a star pendant when I was your age," Marcus explained. "She told me that stars shine brightest in the darkest moments, and that's exactly what you did for me. You were my guiding star when everything went dark." Emma held the bracelet with reverent care, as if it were made of the most precious materials in the universe, which, in a way, it was. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," she whispered, then looked up at her parents. "Can I wear it always?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she helped fasten the bracelet around her daughter's thin wrist. It was more than a gift. It was a symbol of recognition, of worth, of a moment when their humble family had mattered in the vast machinery of the world. "There's something else," Marcus continued, turning to address David and Sarah. "I've been thinking about Emma all night, about her courage and her extraordinary observation skills. I'd like to establish an education fund for her, something to ensure she has every opportunity to develop her remarkable talents." David's pride warred with his practical concerns. "Mr. Wellington, we appreciate the gesture, but Emma's just a normal little girl. What she did was brave, but—" "No," Marcus interrupted gently but firmly. "She's not just a normal little girl. The details she remembered, the clarity of her observations under pressure, the moral courage to speak up when every adult in the room had missed the danger, those aren't normal traits, Mr. Harris. They're extraordinary." He pulled out a business card and handed it to Sarah. "This is my personal assistant's information. I'd like Emma to be evaluated by some child development specialists I know. Not to pressure her or push her into anything she doesn't want, but to understand her capabilities better. And I'd like to discuss some immediate improvements to your family's situation." Emma tugged on Marcus's sleeve, drawing his attention back to her level. "Mr. Wellington, why did the bad man want to hurt you?" The question, asked with such innocent directness, made Marcus pause. How could he explain the complex world of corporate rivalries, international espionage, and the jealousy that extreme success could breed? How could he tell this pure-hearted child that some people destroyed others simply because they couldn't bear to see them succeed? "Sometimes, Emma, when people work very hard and achieve great things, other people become jealous and angry instead of happy for them. It's not right and it's not fair, but it happens. That's why what you did was so special. You chose to help instead of looking away." Emma nodded solemnly, processing this information with the same intense focus she'd shown while watching The Kitchen the night before. "Will more bad people try to hurt you?" Marcus felt a chill at the question, because he knew the answer was probably yes. Last night's attack had been sophisticated and well-planned, suggesting resources and connections that went far beyond a single disgruntled individual. His security team was already investigating corporate rivals and foreign competitors who might benefit from his death. "I have very good people protecting me now," he said carefully. "And I have you watching out for me too, don't I? That makes me feel much safer." But as Marcus prepared to leave the Harris apartment, he couldn't shake Emma's question or his own growing certainty that last night's attack was just the beginning. Someone had wanted him dead badly enough to infiltrate his most secure event, and they would certainly try again. What he didn't realize was that his visit to Queens had already been photographed by long-range cameras, and that his decision to personally thank the Harris family had marked them as targets in a game they didn't even know they were playing. The little girl who had saved a billionaire was about to learn that sometimes being a hero came with a price no child should ever have to pay. As the red Ferrari disappeared down the crowded street, Emma pressed her face against the window, touching the star pendant at her throat and wondering if she would ever see the nice man again. She had no way of knowing that Marcus Wellington was already planning to transform her life in ways that would challenge everything her family thought they knew about their future, or that dark forces were already moving to ensure that transformation would never happen. Marcus Wellington sat in his private office on the 62nd floor of Wellington Tower, Manhattan spread out below him like a circuit board of ambition and achievement. 3 days had passed since his visit to Queens, and the child development evaluation reports lay spread across his mahogany desk like pieces of a puzzle that was revealing a picture more extraordinary than he had imagined possible. Dr. Rachel Chen, one of the nation's foremost experts in gifted child psychology, leaned forward in her chair with an expression of professional excitement barely contained beneath her clinical demeanor. Marcus, in 30 years of evaluating exceptional children, I have never encountered cognitive patterns quite like Emma Harris's. Her spatial intelligence quotient is off the charts, literally. She scored beyond the highest measurable range on 3 separate tests. The second report, compiled by Dr. James Whitmore from Columbia's Child Cognition Institute, confirmed what Marcus had intuited that night in the ballroom. Her pattern recognition abilities are extraordinary. She can identify sequences and anomalies that most adults would miss entirely. But more significantly, she demonstrates what we call environmental hyper-awareness, the ability to process massive amounts of sensory data simultaneously and identify threats or opportunities that others overlook. Marcus picked up the third evaluation, this one from a specialist in childhood trauma and resilience. What strikes me most, Dr. Lisa Martinez had written, is not just Emma's intellectual capabilities, but her moral reasoning development. She operates from a framework of ethical decision-making that typically doesn't emerge until adolescence, combined with the emotional courage to act on those convictions despite potential personal consequences. "Gentlemen," Marcus said to his assembled security team, "what we're looking at isn't just a smart kid who happened to save my life. We're looking at someone with the potential to revolutionize how we approach risk assessment and threat detection. The question is, how do we nurture those abilities without exploiting them?" James Morrison, his head of security, looked uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Sir, with respect, we're talking about a 7-year-old girl from Queens. Maybe we should focus on keeping her and her family safe rather than turning her into some kind of asset." "I'm not talking about turning her into anything," Marcus replied sharply. "I'm talking about giving her opportunities that match her capabilities. The Harris family is living in poverty, while their daughter possesses abilities that could benefit humanity in ways we're only beginning to understand." His personal assistant knocked and entered with a concerned expression. "Mr. Wellington, there's been a development. The FBI contacted us about unusual activity around the Harris family's neighborhood. Someone's been conducting surveillance, professional level, not amateur." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Marcus had feared this possibility from the moment he'd decided to visit Queens personally. By publicly acknowledging Emma's role in saving his life, he had inadvertently painted a target on her family's back. "How bad?" he asked quietly. 3 different vehicles, rotating schedules, always staying just within legal boundaries. "They're good. If Emma hadn't developed that hyper-awareness you mentioned, they probably wouldn't have noticed them at all." Marcus felt his blood run cold. "She noticed them. Called her father yesterday to report new cars with people who watch our building. FBI confirmed her observations were accurate, down to license plate numbers and detailed physical descriptions of the occupants." Dr. Chen shook her head in amazement. A 7-year-old detected professional surveillance that was designed to be invisible. "Marcus, this child's capabilities are beyond extraordinary. They're potentially revolutionary, but they're also making her incredibly valuable to people who might not have her best interests at heart." The weight of responsibility settled on Marcus's shoulders like a physical burden. Emma's extraordinary gifts, the same abilities that had saved his life, were now putting her in danger. Every scenario his security team ran concluded the same way. The Harris family needed protection, but protection meant acknowledging that Emma's abilities made her a target for anyone seeking to gain advantage in the high-stakes world of international business and corporate espionage. "What are our options?" Marcus asked. Morrison consulted his tablet. "We can provide discreet security for the family, but their current location makes it challenging. The building has multiple entry points, no doorman, limited sightlines. If someone really wants to get to them, relocate them," Marcus decided immediately. "Somewhere secure, somewhere they can live normally while we figure out how to handle this long term." "Sir, respectfully, that's a massive step. You're talking about uprooting an entire family, changing their lives completely, based on a threat we're not even sure is real yet." Marcus turned to stare out at the city below, thinking about Emma's question from their meeting, "Will more bad people try to hurt you?" She had understood, even at 7 years old, that his world contained dangers most people never had to contemplate. "The threat is real," he said finally. "Someone tried to kill me at my own event, using intelligence that suggested deep corporate espionage. Now they know Emma was the one who exposed their plan. They'll want to eliminate that variable, either by recruiting her abilities or ensuring she can never identify them again." His phone buzzed with an encrypted message from the FBI task force investigating the poisoning attempt. Marcus read it twice before setting the device down with hands that trembled slightly. "Gentlemen, we have confirmation. The surveillance team watching the Harris family has been traced to the same international network responsible for last week's attack. This isn't paranoia. It's an active threat against a 7-year-old girl whose only crime was saving my life." Dr. Chen stood abruptly. "Marcus, you have to move them immediately. If Emma's pattern recognition abilities are as advanced as our testing suggests, and if she's already detecting the surveillance, then she's also probably sensing other threats we haven't identified yet. That child's mind is processing danger signals that our professional security teams are missing." As if summoned by their conversation, Marcus's encrypted phone rang with a call from David Harris, his voice tight with controlled panic. "Mr. Wellington, I'm sorry to bother you, but Emma says we need to leave our apartment right now. She won't explain why, just keeps saying something feels wrong and different about today. She's never acted like this before. I don't know if I should listen to a 7-year-old or—" "Listen to her," Marcus interrupted, already signaling his security team. "Pack only essential items and get out of the building immediately. My security team will meet you at the coffee shop on Northern Boulevard in 15 minutes. Don't take your car, don't use your usual route, and don't tell anyone where you're going." "Mr. Wellington, what's happening?" Marcus closed his eyes, knowing that his answer would change the Harris family's life forever. "Emma's gifts aren't just remarkable, David. They're dangerous. And right now, they're the only thing standing between your family and people who want to use them for purposes that would destroy everything you hold dear." As emergency protocols activated around him and his security team rushed to extract the Harris family from immediate danger, Marcus realized that saving Emma's life was about to become as complex and challenging as the empire he'd spent decades building. The little girl who had saved him was about to discover that being extraordinary came with a price, and that sometimes the people who wanted to help her were just as dangerous as those who wanted to hurt her. The game had changed completely, and Emma Harris, 7 years old and clutching a silver star pendant, had become the most valuable piece on a board where the stakes were measured in billions of dollars and human lives. The Wellington Industries safe house in Westchester County looked like something from a magazine spread about modern luxury. All glass walls, minimalist furniture, and technology so advanced it seemed to anticipate needs before they were expressed. Emma Harris stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching deer graze on the manicured lawn, while her parents spoke in hushed, worried tones with Marcus and his security team in the adjacent room. 3 weeks had passed since their emergency evacuation from Queens, and Emma was still adjusting to a world where breakfast arrived on silver trays, where her temporary bedroom was larger than their entire former apartment, and where silent men in dark suits monitored every entrance 24 hours a day. The silver star pendant at her throat had become her anchor to reality, a reminder that this surreal existence had begun with a single moment of courage that had saved a man's life. "The surveillance team that was watching your building has been neutralized," James Morrison reported to the assembled group, his tone professional but grim. "However, our intelligence indicates they were just the reconnaissance phase of a much larger operation. The threat level against Emma and your family has actually increased." Sarah Harris clutched her husband's hand, her knuckles white with tension. "I don't understand. Emma saved Mr. Wellington's life. Why would anyone want to hurt her for doing something good?" Marcus leaned forward, his expression carrying the weight of decisions that kept him awake at night. "Because Emma's abilities represent something extraordinarily valuable in the wrong hands. The people who tried to kill me aren't just business rivals. They're part of an international network that specializes in corporate espionage and strategic asset acquisition. They've realized that someone who can detect threats and patterns the way Emma does could be worth billions to the right buyer." David's face hardened with protective anger. "Asset acquisition? You're talking about my daughter like she's some kind of commodity." "No," Marcus said firmly. "I'm talking about how other people see her. To me, Emma is a remarkable little girl who deserves every opportunity to grow up safe and happy. But to them, she's a human surveillance system that could predict their enemies' moves, identify security vulnerabilities, and provide strategic advantages that no technology can match." Emma turned from the window, having listened to every word despite the adult's assumption that she was lost in watching the wildlife outside. At 7 years old, she possessed an intuitive understanding of danger that had saved Marcus's life, and now that same understanding was telling her something that made her stomach churn with fear. "They're not going to give up, are they?" she asked quietly, her voice carrying a maturity that reminded everyone present just how exceptional she truly was. "The bad people want to take me away from Mommy and Daddy." The room fell silent. Marcus felt his heart break a little at the matter-of-fact acceptance in Emma's voice, as if she had already resigned herself to being hunted for gifts she had never asked for. "That's not going to happen," Marcus promised, meeting her eyes with absolute conviction. "I have resources, Emma. I have the best security team in the world, unlimited financial backing, and legal connections that can protect your family from anyone who tries to hurt you. But I need you to help me understand something." Emma walked over to the couch where Marcus was sitting, climbing up beside him with the unself-conscious trust that children reserve for people they instinctively know are safe. "What do you want to know?" "Dylan, when you detected the poison in my dessert, when you noticed the surveillance team watching your building, when you knew you needed to leave your apartment immediately, what does it feel like? How do you know these things?" Emma was quiet for a long moment, her young mind working to articulate concepts that most adults would struggle to understand. "It's like, you know how when you walk into a room and you can tell if people are happy or sad or angry, even if they don't say anything? It's like that, but for everything. The man putting stuff in your food felt angry and excited at the same time, which was wrong. The people watching our building felt patient and hungry, like cats watching mice. And that last day, everything felt tighter, like right before a thunderstorm." "Doctor." Chen, who had been observing from the corner, stepped forward with barely contained excitement. Marcus, what Emma is describing is environmental empathy combined with threat pattern recognition at a level that shouldn't be possible at her age. She's not just seeing details, she's intuiting emotional and intentional patterns in her environment that allow her to predict dangerous behavior, which makes her invaluable to anyone who deals in information or security, Morrison added grimly. Corporate espionage, military intelligence, law enforcement, criminal organizations, the applications are limitless. Marcus stood abruptly, pacing to the window where he could see his security perimeter maintaining their vigilant watch. Then we have to make her too valuable to steal and too protected to touch. We're not hiding anymore. Sir? Morrison looked confused by the sudden shift in strategy. Emma's abilities aren't a liability to be hidden. They're a gift to be developed and protected. I'm establishing the Harris Foundation for Child Development, with Emma as our first research partner. We're going to study her abilities openly, with full media coverage, complete transparency about the security measures protecting her, and partnerships with every major law enforcement agency in the world. David stood up sharply. You want to put our daughter in the spotlight, make her even more of a target? I want to make her untouchable, Marcus corrected. Right now, she's valuable because she's secret. The moment she becomes a public figure with international protection and scientific documentation, she becomes too visible to kidnap and too important to harm. Any attack against her would trigger responses from governments, corporations, and law enforcement agencies worldwide. Sarah joined her husband, their parental instincts warring with their recognition that their daughter's safety might require unprecedented measures. What exactly are you proposing? Marcus turned back to face the family that had become the center of his universe in ways he was only beginning to understand. I'm proposing that we give Emma the education and development opportunities her abilities deserve, while simultaneously making her the most protected child on Earth. Private tutors, advanced education programs, specialized training, all conducted in secure facilities with world-class security and complete media transparency. Emma tugged on Marcus's sleeve again, a gesture that had become familiar over their weeks together. Mr. Wellington, if I help you learn about my abilities, will it help other kids who think differently too? The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. Here was a 7-year-old girl facing threats that would terrify most adults, thinking about how her sacrifice could benefit other children. The moral courage that had driven her to save his life was now driving her to consider using her gifts for the greater good, regardless of the personal cost. Yes, Emma, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Understanding how your mind works could help us identify and protect other children with similar abilities. You could be the key to helping hundreds or thousands of kids who feel different or alone. Emma looked at her parents, then back at Marcus, her 7-year-old mind grappling with decisions that would shape not just her future, but potentially the future of how society understood and protected exceptional children. Will I still be able to live with Mommy and Daddy? Will I still be Emma, or will I have to be something different? Marcus knelt down to her level, taking her small hands in his. You will always be Emma Harris, and you will always belong with your parents. Everything we do will be about helping you grow into whoever you want to become, not forcing you to be what others need you to be. But even as Marcus made that promise, his secure phone was buzzing with an encrypted message that would change everything again. The international network hunting Emma had just revealed their true scope and resources, and the game they were playing was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The little girl who had saved a billionaire with her extraordinary gifts was about to discover that sometimes being special meant making choices no child should ever have to make. And Marcus Wellington, for all his wealth and power, was about to learn that there were some threats that money and security teams couldn't neutralize. threats that could only be defeated by the same courage and insight that had saved his life in the first place. As Emma Harris considered her future, surrounded by luxury and protection, but facing dangers beyond imagination, she touched the star pendant at her throat and wondered if being special was worth the price everyone seemed willing to pay for her abilities. The answer would determine not just her fate, but the fate of everyone who had risked everything to keep her safe. The secure conference room in Wellington Tower buzzed with tension as Marcus reviewed the intelligence report that had arrived during the night. FBI Director Patricia Collins sat across from him, her expression grim as she laid out photographs and documents that painted a picture of conspiracy reaching far beyond anything they had previously imagined. "Marcus, we've been approaching this all wrong," Director Collins began, sliding a photograph across the polished table. "The attempt on your life wasn't about corporate rivalry or foreign espionage. It was about Emma Harris." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face as he studied the surveillance photo, taken weeks before his gala, showing Emma and her father leaving their Queen's apartment building. "They knew about her abilities before she saved my life? We've traced the network back 18 months. They've been monitoring exceptional children worldwide, kids who demonstrate unusual pattern recognition, threat detection, or environmental awareness. Emma wasn't just on their radar, she was their primary target." James Morrison leaned forward, connecting dots that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. "You mean they tried to poison Mr. Wellington knowing Emma would detect it?" "We believe they were testing her abilities while simultaneously creating a situation where they could legitimately approach her family as grateful beneficiaries of her heroism. If she hadn't spoken up, you'd be dead, and they'd have direct access to study her as a traumatized witness. When she did speak up, they planned to recruit your gratitude to fund their research." Marcus slammed his hand on the table, causing coffee cups to rattle. "They were willing to murder me to get to a 7-year-old girl." "It gets worse," Director Collins continued, producing another set of documents. "The Harris Foundation you're establishing? 3 of the child development specialists you've consulted with are on their payroll. The Safe House in Westchester. They've had architectural plans for 6 weeks. Even some of your security team has been compromised." The implications crashed over Marcus like a tsunami. Every decision he'd made to protect Emma had been anticipated, potentially manipulated, by people who understood her value better than he had. The foundation, the media strategy, even the secure location, all of it could be part of an elaborate trap designed to give them legitimate access to study and ultimately control Emma's extraordinary abilities. "How deep does this go?" Marcus asked, though part of him dreaded the answer. "International. We've identified cells in 12 countries, all focused on identifying and acquiring children with exceptional cognitive abilities. They call it Project Constellation, mapping and controlling the next generation of human intelligence before traditional governments even recognize it exists." Marcus's secure phone buzzed with an emergency alert from the Westchester Safe House. Emma's voice came through the encrypted speaker, high and frightened in a way he'd never heard before. "Mr. Wellington, something's wrong. Really, really wrong. The people watching us aren't the same as yesterday, and they feel angry instead of protective. Daddy doesn't believe me, but I think some of the guard men are different too. Their feelings are cold and focused, like the man who poisoned your food." Morrison was already activating emergency protocols while Director Collins coordinated with federal response teams. But Marcus knew they were operating at a disadvantage. If Emma's pattern recognition was detecting the threat, it meant the infiltration was already advanced. "Emma," Marcus said into the phone, trying to keep his voice calm while his mind raced through contingency plans, "I need you to listen very carefully. Remember the game we talked about, where you would help me understand what you're feeling about the people around you? The one where I tell you what colors people's feelings are?" "Exactly. Can you tell me about the colors you're seeing right now?" Emma's voice became more focused, less frightened, as she shifted into the analytical mode that made her abilities so extraordinary. Mommy and Daddy are yellow scared and orange worried. The new guard men are red excited and black patient, which is wrong because guards should be green protective and blue alert. And there are people outside who feel purple hungry, like they're waiting for something they really want. Director Collins was speaking rapidly into her radio, coordinating with federal assets converging on the safe house. But Marcus knew they were fighting a battle that had been lost before it began. Emma's captors had been planning this for months, while he had been playing catch-up for weeks. Emma, I need you to do something very brave. Can you tell me if there's anyone in the house right now who feels green, protective, and blue alert like they should? A pause as Emma's extraordinary mind processed the emotional landscape around her, reading intentions and analyzing threat patterns with an accuracy that surpassed any technological surveillance system. Mrs. Martinez, the lady who brings us food. She feels green and blue, but also red scared for me. And then there's someone else. Someone hiding who feels silver determined and white pure, like they want to help, but they're afraid too. Marcus felt a surge of hope. Maria Martinez had been vetted by his personal security team, and if Emma's abilities were identifying her as trustworthy, it meant they still had allies inside the compromised safe house. Emma, I need you to find Mrs. Martinez very quietly. Don't let anyone see you, especially not the guard men who feel wrong. Can you do that? Yes, but Mr. Wellington? I'm scared. The purple hungry people outside are getting closer, and the red excited guardmen are starting to move around more. It feels like right before the thunderstorm, but bigger. Marcus closed his eyes, knowing that he was about to ask a 7-year-old girl to navigate a situation that would challenge experienced intelligence operatives. But Emma's abilities were their only advantage in a game where every other piece had been compromised. Emma, you saved my life once by being brave enough to speak up when adults weren't listening. Now, I need you to save your own life by being brave enough to trust your feelings and help the good people find you. Can you do that? I think so. But Mr. Wellington, after this is over, can we go somewhere where my feelings don't have to save people anymore? Somewhere where I can just be a regular little girl? The heartbreaking innocence of her request nearly broke Marcus's composure. Here was a child with abilities that governments would kill for, asking only for the chance to experience a normal childhood, something that her extraordinary gifts might never allow. I promise you, Emma, after we get through this, I'll find a way to give you the most normal, happy childhood any little girl has ever had. You have my word. But even as Marcus made that promise, Director Collins was showing him satellite imagery that revealed the true scope of what they were facing. The safe house wasn't just compromised, it was surrounded by a coordinated extraction team with resources that suggested military-level backing. Emma Harris, the 7-year-old girl who had saved a billionaire's life with her extraordinary abilities, was about to face the ultimate test of those same gifts. The people who had spent months planning to acquire her weren't just criminals, they were professionals who understood her value better than anyone else in the world. The game had always been rigged, and Emma was the prize that everyone was willing to kill for. Her only advantages were the same qualities that had saved Marcus's life, her ability to read danger in ways others couldn't, and her courage to act on what she knew was right, even when the adults around her failed to understand. But this time, the stakes weren't just one man's life. This time, the stakes were the freedom and future of the most gifted child anyone had ever encountered, and the survival of everyone who had dared to protect her. Emma Harris crept through the safe house corridors with the silent precision of a child who had learned to read danger in every shadow, every sound, every subtle shift in the emotional atmosphere around her. The silver star pendant at her throat caught the dim emergency lighting as she made her way toward the kitchen where Mrs. Martinez would be preparing the evening meal, her 7-year-old mind processing threat patterns that would have overwhelmed most adults. The guard men who felt wrong were positioned at strategic points throughout the house, their red excited and black patient emotional signatures creating a map of danger that only Emma could read. She pressed herself against walls, moved when their attention shifted, and navigated through blind spots that her extraordinary environmental awareness revealed with mathematical precision. Mrs. Martinez was arranging dinner plates when Emma slipped into the kitchen like a ghost, her approach so quiet that the older woman startled when small hands tugged gently at her apron. "Emma! Nina, you scared me. What are you doing wandering around? Your parents are looking for you." "Mrs. Martinez," Emma whispered urgently, "the bad people are here. Some of the guards are really bad people pretending to be good guards. Mr. Wellington told me to find you because you feel green protective instead of red excited like the bad ones." Mrs. Martinez knelt down to Emma's level, her expression shifting from confusion to alarm as she processed what the child was telling her. In the 3 weeks she'd been caring for the Harris family, she'd witnessed Emma's extraordinary abilities firsthand, and she'd learned to trust the girl's instincts implicitly. How many bad guards, Mia? Emma closed her eyes, extending her environmental awareness throughout the house like radar, reading the emotional signatures of every person within her range. 6 of them. 2 by the front door, 1 in the hallway upstairs near Mommy and Daddy, 1 in the security office, and 2 outside by the cars. The good guards are gone. They feel empty, like nobody's there anymore. The implication hit Mrs. Martinez like a physical blow. The legitimate security team had been neutralized, replaced by operatives whose job was to deliver Emma to people who saw her as nothing more than a valuable asset to be studied and controlled. And outside? How many people outside? Emma's face scrunched in concentration as she pushed her abilities to their limits, reading the larger perimeter around the safe house. Lots. Maybe 15 or 20. They're in a big circle around the house, and they all feel purple hungry and silver determined. They're waiting for something. Mrs. Martinez pulled out a phone that Emma had never seen before, speaking rapidly in Spanish to someone on the other end. Within moments, she was moving with purpose, gathering specific items from hidden locations throughout the kitchen. "Emma, I need you to listen very carefully. I'm not just the cook here. I work for Mr. Wellington's special security team, the people he trusts when he can't trust anyone else. We knew this might happen, and we have a plan. But I need you to be the bravest little girl in the world for just a little longer." Emma nodded solemnly, understanding that her extraordinary gifts had brought them to this moment, where her courage would determine whether her family lived or died. "There's a hidden passage behind the pantry that leads to a tunnel Mr. Wellington had built when the house was constructed. It comes out in the forest half a mile away, where good people are waiting to take you somewhere truly safe. But first, we need to get your parents." They moved through the house like shadows, Emma's ability to read emotional signatures, allowing them to avoid the false guards, while Mrs. Martinez disabled security systems that had been compromised by the infiltration. When they reached the 2nd floor, Emma's parents were huddled in their bedroom, David holding a makeshift weapon, while Sarah clutched a phone with no signal. "David, Sarah, we're leaving now," Mrs. Martinez whispered as she opened the hidden panel behind what appeared to be a solid wall. Emma's abilities detected the infiltration. "The entire security team has been compromised. My daughter was right again," David said with a mixture of pride and terror as he helped Sarah into the narrow passage. "How does she do it?" "She reads people's intentions, like other kids read picture books," Mrs. Martinez replied, guiding the family through darkness, lit only by small LED strips. "And right now, She's the reason we're still alive. The tunnel stretched ahead of them, a concrete lifeline built by Marcus Wellington's paranoid but prescient planning. As they moved through the underground passage, Emma could feel the emotional turbulence above them as their escape was discovered, the red excited signatures shifting to orange frustrated and then to black angry as the realization set in that their primary target had vanished. "They know we're gone," Emma whispered. They feel really, really angry now, like when you break something important that can't be fixed. Mrs. Martinez increased their pace, knowing that their head start was measured in minutes before sophisticated tracking equipment would identify their escape route. "How much further to feel safe, Mija?" Emma extended her awareness as far as it could reach, touching the emotional signatures of people positioned throughout the forest around them. What she found made her smile for the first time in hours. There are good people waiting for us. Lots of them. They feel green protective and silver determined, but in a good way. And Mr. Wellington is there too. He feels golden relieved and blue worried, which means he's been scared for us, but he's going to be happy when he sees we're okay. They emerged from the tunnel into a forest clearing where Marcus Wellington waited with what appeared to be half the FBI's tactical response team, along with military personnel whose presence indicated federal involvement at the highest levels. Emma ran directly to Marcus, who swept her into his arms with relief, so profound it was visible to everyone present. "You did it, Emma. Your abilities saved not just your family, but potentially dozens of other children these people had targeted. The information we gathered from their operation tonight is going to shut down their entire network." FBI Director Collins approached the reunited family, her expression carrying both admiration and concern. "Emma, what you accomplished tonight, reading their intentions, navigating the house unseen, guiding your family to safety, it's beyond anything we thought possible from someone your age." Emma looked up at Director Collins with eyes that seemed far older than her 7 years. "I just want the bad people to stop trying to take me away from my family. I want to use my abilities to help good people, not to be a thing that bad people fight over." Marcus knelt down to Emma's level, recognizing that this moment would define not just her future, but how society would learn to understand and protect children with extraordinary abilities. "Emma, I'm establishing something new, not just a foundation to study exceptional children, but a school where kids like you can learn to develop their gifts safely, with their families, surrounded by people who understand that being different doesn't mean being alone. You'll be our first student, but more importantly, you'll help us learn how to protect and nurture other children who see the world the way you do." Emma touched her star pendant, thinking about everything that had led to this moment, from a poisoned dessert to a midnight escape through underground tunnels. Will there be other kids who can feel what people are thinking, kids who see patterns that grown-ups miss? Yes, Marcus promised. Kids who are special in ways the world is just beginning to understand. And you're going to help us make sure they never have to face what you've faced alone. 6 months later, Emma Harris stood in the sunlit classroom of the Wellington Institute for Exceptional Children, wearing a school uniform and the same silver star pendant that had become her symbol of courage. Around her, 12 other children with extraordinary abilities learned to develop their gifts in an environment of safety, understanding, and protection that Emma's bravery had made possible. The Harris family lived in a beautiful home on the Institute's campus, where David worked as facilities coordinator and Sarah directed the Family Support Services program. Marcus visited weekly, not as a benefactor, but as someone who understood that true wealth came from nurturing the extraordinary potential that existed in children who saw the world differently. Emma had kept her promise to herself. She had found a way to use her abilities to help good people while still being allowed to be a little girl who played with friends, learned normal subjects, and experience the childhood that every exceptional child deserved. And sometimes, when she looked at her reflection wearing the star pendant that had started everything, Emma Harris smiled, knowing that the scared 7-year-old who had saved a billionaire's life had grown into someone who was saving something even more precious. The future of every special child who would never again have to face their extraordinary gifts alone. The little girl who had seen danger when adults looked away had become the guardian angel for children whose only crime was being born with abilities that made them valuable to the wrong people and precious to the right ones. And Marcus Wellington, the billionaire who had learned that true success was measured not in dollars but in lives transformed, had discovered that sometimes the greatest fortune came from a child's courage to speak up when silence would have been safer. In a world that often feared what it didn't understand, Emma Harris had proven that being different wasn't a burden to be hidden, but a gift to be celebrated, protected, and shared with others brave enough to see the extraordinary potential that existed in every child who dared to be special.